We are now recording and we will jump right into it. So welcome to today's class. I see your text there, sister. I'm in agreement. And yeah, so let's jump right into the codes. I gave you a little introduction that if this goes on YouTube, you didn't get to see. We're going to jump right into codes, and then we're going to go into reconciling the calendar again, you guys, with the grains, that it locks in the dates and it doesn't go astray. Okay. Paul, did you want to start us off, brother, with sharing with what you have?
Sure, I can start us off today.
And I believe you told me
And
this was about the chromosomes.
yeah, 24 chromosomes. Um, the inception of the idea was from Marty here in class on
Okay,
Discord.
very good. All right, so
Um,
Marty's here. She could see that, and she's
right,
excited. Very good.
right.
Take it away, brother.
Let's
You
see
should
if I
be able
can
to share.
find trying to find the right one here. So this turned out to have so much data in it that I had to split it into 4 layers.
Oh, that's fine. That
and
is fine, brother.
and which is amazing because it's such a skinny table. The first thing I did when I found this, first of all, I couldn't find 24 chromosomes in the Tanakh. Um, when Marty first asked if anybody had searched it, and I told her I couldn't find it. But later I picked it up again and I took out the Vavs and the Yods, and then it came up one time. So 24 chromosomes.
And by
And
the
I
way,
first,
an accepted method from the rabbis, you guys. That's called truncation. Where
I was wondering, if
Yeah,
there's a
it's
rule book
okay to do
somewhere.
that. They even do that with proper biblical Hebrew. Like some Hebrew words we'll see that are truncated. For
Right,
instance, the word David or David, the name David, is not
right.
just Daled Vav Dalet, it has a yod in there as well. But in the biblical text that we see, it's truncated. The yod
Yeah.
is dropped.
Like
So
this is the long version of David right here.
that's right. There you
Yep,
go. You
yep,
can see
yeah.
the long version. In some cases, you'll see where it's truncated. They will drop the yod. And so
Right,
that's
right.
okay. It's understood. It's David, right?
That's great. That's
Very
great.
good.
And I have another question on code searching rules later. Actually, I can ask now. I mean, like a bet, that's basically the word in, right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah. hmm
What about
So you could say a
hey?
lot with just five Hebrew letters. You could say a sentence in there. So
Right,
bet would be used as in. If you
right,
wanted to say of, it would be a lamed, right?
right.
Or from, it would be a
From is
mem.
men, right?
That's right.
What
That
about the? Is that is
the would be a
hey?
hey. That the
Yeah,
would be a hey. Yes.
right. Yeah, that's because I like to string together sentences. I don't know if you've
And there
seen
are
that
other
from me.
prefixes as well, like chol and kai, like you see. Let me see if I can highlight. Oh, you see where David is, where you just
Yeah,
pointed out. If you go one line
yeah.
up and go backwards, you'll see a C and a yod the other way. Go back the other
Oh,
way.
the other way.
Yeah, you see that C and that yod. That's kai. That's another prefix, right?
Okay. Uh-huh.
So
Uh-huh.
yeah.
One more question, since
hmm
we're talking about questions. What letter is the hashtag?
The hashtag.
Like
That's a
Ella
Dalet.
hashtag.
That's a Dalet. That's
That's a
Adonai.
Dalit.
So those
Okay.
two words that you're pointing out is Adonai. Yeah.
Okay.
And then
All
and
right.
that line that you're in with the dark with the Yahuwah's name and you see
Mhm.
that the minus sign, that's a hey.
That's the hay. Yeah.
That's a hey. Now if you go back on that same line all the way down to
I know.
Elohim, you
Yeah,
see you see the asterisk?
that's a Lamed. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
that's right. So it's
Okay.
and wait, and the reason for this is a Orthodox Jewish rabbi wrote this program, and he did not want to write out Yah's name in any form, so he changed one letter into a symbol, so he wouldn't do that. But we understand what that symbol means. Okay, does that make sense? We didn't lose any
It
letters, by the way,
does.
you guys. We didn't lose any letters. Each one of those letters are identified by a symbol. Okay, that's why it's in this particular program.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
And we won't do that, by the way, in our new program that we're getting, so there won't be any confusion. Yeah.
uh,
All right.
all
Take it
right.
away, brother.
So this layer I titled 23 plus 1 equals 24. So this is harkening back to Ron Wyatt's discovery of the blood and having it tested, and the Israeli lab saying, sir, this blood only has 24 chromosomes. And so the assumption was that 23 chromosomes came from Mary, and then one was from the father. And so here we go, and I'll show you what the table says. Okay, so in Hebrew gematria, the kaf is 20 and the dalet is 4. So that's 24. And then chromosomes. And then chromosome singular comes right in here and connects right here. And I like how the kaf and the kaf, it's all very symmetrical. The resh and the resh and the mem and the mem and the Zion and the Zion, and all meeting here, chromosome and chromosome. This one is plural, and this is the singular version. Okay, so 24 chromosomes, and I have blood right here and blood right here, nestled right up to the access term. And then I have in green here, I have the DNA, Hey, Dalid, Noon, Aleph, crossing blood and chromosome. Uh, so the theory from Ron Wyatt basically is that 23 calf gimel chromosomes were from Mary, so Mary. And then there was one more from the father. So we have, this is in green, it's the word for plus, ending right here on the dalet. And then the word one, aleph, chet, dalet, both ending right here. And then this word is plus, and it also means more. So basically, plus one more equals 24. And then Yeshua's name goes right through there. Okay, and so plus one more from the father. I have that right over here. Mem, Hey, Aleph, Bet from the father. And then there's Yahuwah right there. And it also connects right here with the Hey, Yahuwah. So from the father. And the conjecture is that it's a Y chromosome from the father, which determines the sex of the child, in this case, a male child. And I noticed that there's a Y right next to here. The yod in English is a Y. Am I correct? I hope I'm correct. The translation.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, yes.
So basically, Y from the father and Y chromosome. Now watch this fascinating pictogram I'm going to show you. So there's a yod here, a yod here, and a yod here. I need everybody to tilt your head to the right, and you're going to see a Y right here with the tips like Y, Y, and Y in the shape of a Y. The Y, the reason that's significant, it's right at the end of the word chromosome, and then connected to this term right here, which is sex or gender. So basically, the Y chromosome is the chromosome that determines the sex of the child. So this is an amazing pictogram right here. Right here, we have Yeshua embedded in thy salvation, Elohim, right here. Um, this word going up here is actually equals 24. There's the one plus one more equals 24. I'm going to move over here now. There's once again 24, sex or gender. We have 23 from Mary. And then here's the plus in the green and 1 in the blue. So plus 1 from Mary. Wait, no, it's 23 from Mary. Plus 1 from Yahuwah.
And it actually says from
Equals
Yahuwah there,
from
doesn't
Yahuwah, yeah.
it?
And then equals 24. So nice little thing here. One more cluster. It's pretty amazing right here. So we have right here, Ruach, spirit in the white, and then in the teal, placed. One in the blue, more in the green. Inside, womb in the pink of Mary. So spirit placed one more in the womb of Mary, and then 24 right there. That is some cool stuff right there. But I love this Y right here with sex, gender. I'm going to go to the next layer. Okay, I have entitled
So the
this
same
one
one, just a different version, right?
exactly.
Okay,
It's
okay.
24 chromosomes. And I entitled this one Saved Through the Blood of Yeshua. And I'm going to jump right into a text about that. It's Judges 10:15, and it's the end part of it. It's deliver us, we pray thee this day. That's the text I want to show you. So deliver us this day, we pray thee, right here. And crossing that is the Lamb in blue. And the Lamb, this is through in orange, through blood. And then we have saved in yellow, once again, through blood. We have over here, we have sacrifice right there. We have 24 blood. I like that. 24 blood. It's kind of a new term. Life. So basically, life is in the 24 blood. This term in the olive green going across here is mercy, which I'll get to later. Right here is thy salvation with Yeshua embedded in there. And then the shin begins the word saved going through there. Now, like I said, this was all Ron Wyatt's doing. So this next section here is going to be about that. So we have in the brown here, the cross in the brown. And then in the lavender is placed, sharing Azadi with the cross. So cross placed. I'm going to use a bet as in, and then a hole. So the cross placed in a hole, and then blood connected to through, and that's connected to a hole. So blood through a hole placed above grotto in black. And then wherever there's going to be a grotto, you got to figure the ark is here in the white ark. And here's covenant spelled one way, crossing ark. And here's covenant spelled another way. And then we have blood poured in the teal. And the word pour sits right on top of seat, like mercy seat. And here's mercy, the olive term going all the way through the table. So mercy seat, blood poured. We have life, blood. We have my in green, my 24 blood. And then Yeshua embedded in salvation. And then, of course, seat. We have grotto again, right here in black, and it connects with saved. And I figure the grotto saved the Ark of the Covenant from getting stolen or from destruction. So, yep. And then we have cross one more time right up here. Okay. And Marty asked me if Ron Wyatt's name was in the table. I couldn't find it, but Ron, of course, is embedded in Ark with the Resh Vav Noon. So what I did to find his last name, I put a row skip. So let me do that now. I actually put a row skip in when I first started searching this table, but I felt like the spirit was saying there's going to be so much data, you don't need to do a row skip. So, so this is where the ark is. and then Wyatt is sitting around right on top of Ron. I did have to take out one Vav to make it happen, but there's Wyatt, so right on top of Ark. Okay, and that is. I think I'll save the other two layers for next week.
Okay, very good.
Yep,
And so that kind
because I
of
know
kind of
you got.
spins off of the Shroud of the Turin and Ron and Wyatt conversations, you guys. And I think Marty requested somebody to look for the 24
Yeah,
chromosomes. So good job, Paul. I'm
thank
very
you,
proud
thank
of
you,
you.
thank
Very
you,
thorough. I like the
thank
way
you.
that you are keeping it organized and breaking it up into, different files, even though it's the same. I do the same thing because it gets kind of confusing and jumbled if you keep it all in one file, right? So that kind of makes sense to do that, you guys. It'll help you out. Um,
And
you can
just for
label. Yeah,
a preview for next week, the two layers I can show next week are titled "His Name is in the DNA." That's also in this table,
right.
and also a whole table in this table of his family tree. It's fascinating. With
Hallelujah.
includes a pictogram of a tree, which is amazing. So you can look forward to that next week.
So cool. And I was just commenting in the chat there while you were doing that that only 3% of the world is AB blood. And most of those people are going to be the dominant of AB is from the Middle East and not just one country. We're talking about like all through the Mediterranean and stuff. So um it's not a popular, it's not a very common. It's kind of rare. They say it's rare, and it's more dominant. And so, Marty, you probably got some connections to the Middle East somewhere, to the Mediterranean. So that's why I said that. So, um, anybody else got any codes they want to share? Leanna, you working on anything? Because I'm going to take us in another direction if you don't. Like I said before this.
I am working on one, but I don't have it as complete as I want it.
Okay.
So I'll
No pressure. Listen, no pressure. I'm never going to pressure you guys to share. I want you guys to flow freely. And when you feel like you're released and you're supposed to share something, then you do. Okay. So don't let me ever make you feel like you're being put on the spot. And by the way, I cannot wait until we get new software and see what you guys do with that. So that I am very excited about that. And so, um, I think we're going to see some amazing things. Some of the last ones that you've done, Leanna, were amazing, and I think you're going to do really well. And Paul, you're also above par, so I'm excited about that. So you can see even with the software that we're working with, amazing results. That was just kind of off the cuff that Paul was able to do, and it's something that Marty brought up in one of the last meetings, right? So, um, good job, you guys. Um, I want to take us in another direction because I'm just coming out of Passover week, and I spent a lot of time in this study and teaching this and thinking about it. Matter of fact, I go to bed thinking about this and wake up thinking about this and cramming and studying and willing to travel and to prove what I'm about to show you. Now, I want to ask you a question. When was Yeshua raised from the dead? Was it Easter Sunday? Because they celebrated Easter here recently, and then the Pope dies the next day. No coincidence, I'm sure. But is that the day that Yeshua rose from the dead? No, it is not. The calendar is all over the place, and that's just the Catholic Church. The Protestant Church is very well the same way because they take a lot of the Catholic traditions. They celebrate Easter, and so they're going to have it on the same day. That day floats and moves every year. And I don't want to sound like a hypocrite or anything, but it seems like the calendar that I've been teaching does the same thing. However, it doesn't. especially when you look at it on Yah's calendar and his layout, it doesn't float anywhere. It only does that on the Gregorian. All right. Now, here's what doesn't float on the calendar. That's planting and harvest seasons. That is going to be the same time every year. You hear me, right? And so, just like Yah created the sun, moon, and the stars, he created these grains, and we're talking about organic grains, not GMO grains. And there are GMO grains out there, folks. We cannot get around it. And that is in everything that we eat. Do you know there are 300 varieties of avocado? There are 300 plus varieties of mango. There's 200 varieties of wheat. You know how many we started with? And it goes back 10,000 years. Couple of handfuls at most. What they call or landrace or heritage seed, right? And by the way, these are ones that if you're gluten intolerant, you can eat these grains. The ones that you can't eat are the GMO seeds, folks. And it has made a mess of our calendar, these grains that have come on the scene, because one thing that's happened to us is we've lost connection to an agricultural calendar. And this is what I was trying to get across to the people I was talking to at Passover, is we got a problem with when it comes to first fruits and keeping these days exactly like the Bible says. And I'm one who is fixed on attention to detail, folks. We don't cut corners when it comes to this. We cannot do that. And I've had people say, "Oh, what's the difference? Yeshua, celebrating Yeshua's birthday and keeping Christmas and keeping Easter. What's the difference? It doesn't matter." It does matter, folks. It does matter. Do you realize that there are people on various calendars that are keeping what's called first fruits, which is the resurrection of Yeshua, 7 days later on the calendar? And by the way, I recently learned from talking, and that's one thing I love about these feasts is being able to sit down by the campfire. We build a fire every night, and talking with my rabbi friend and asking him, what do the Jews do for first fruits? Do they still go and wave the sheaves? And you know what he told me, you guys? I was floored. You know what he told me? They don't do it anymore. And they barely keep Shavuot. You know why? You know why that is? Because the calendar was changed. They were forced not to. Here, you know when it happened? It happened under Constantine. You can see it in his edict. Constantine in 325 made an edict where the believers, the ones that were following after the teaching of Yeshua, because you see, Constantine hijacked the way and it became the Roman Catholic Church. And he said he was de-Judaizing anything, nothing Judaized, right? So we can no longer keep the Feast of Weeks or the Sabbath according to the sun and the moon, right? He said Feast of Weeks specifically. And you know what the Jews started doing? Because they couldn't count the weeks, which leads up to a grain harvest. You know what they started doing? They started counting omers instead. That's what and so when you see other congregations, even Christians counting omers, it comes from the Jews who come up with this because Constantine forced them to, you guys. It is not in your Bible to count omers. The only place you see omers being collected is Exodus 16. And it's in the form of manna when we're collecting manna, right? An omer is a measure. That's exactly right. It's about a handful. It's about a handful is what an omer is, right? We're not told to count omers. The Jews started doing this because Constantine told them they could no longer count the weeks. And we're talking about the same feast. So what do? They count 50 omers. Why? Because they no longer keep the Feast of Weeks. They don't. And they don't even keep the Feast of First Fruits anymore. which they did in the temple time, all the way up to Constantine they did. But when the calendar was changed and Constantine said you will no longer do that, they changed things. And they even wrote about it in the Talmud, and you know, they give themselves free leeway to change Yah's laws. They can override the Torah at any time. Okay, and this is why we have the Talmud. All right. So they started ignoring the moon and ignoring the grain, because after 70 AD, there's no longer a temple, you guys. So we could no longer go to the temple and bring a sheaf at barley and wave the sheaf, or at Shavuot time, waving loaves of bread, because we're not waving sheaves. We're waving loaves of bread, which we've already had we've harvested some grain. We have turned it into flour. We have turned it into dough and bread. And now we're waving the loaves. That's a lot of work. It's different than barley. Make note of that, okay? You have to have golden wheat to do that. You cannot have green wheat. You will have a paste. If you try to go out in the field and harvest some green wheat, and you try to grind that grain up, I challenge you to do it. You're going to get a lovely paste, not dry flour, okay? You cannot circumvent Yah's perfect order, okay? This is why these grains lock these days into the calendar. You can't get around it, even with GMO. Even with GMO, my friend, you cannot manipulate the grain where it hides this fact. And I'm going to show you that in a couple of presentations that I got for you, because we're going to talk about two types of wheat: winter wheat and spring wheat. Okay, don't get it confused. Wheat is not harvested in the spring just because it's called spring wheat. I get that every year. Jonathan, we have spring wheat, and they'll show me barley being harvested in Israel in May. Okay, nowhere in the world, folks, can you get harvestable wheat in May. And Yah fixed it that way. I'm going to prove it to you. Okay, so what happens, and what I mean by the devil's in the details, is we get this day by Acts 2, called Pentecost. We don't see it anywhere else in Scripture. And by the way, this is a Greek word. And it's a poor translation of what it's supposed to represent. It's supposed to be Shavuot, which is, if you want to translate it to the English, it's called Feast of Weeks. And the reason they call it Feast of Weeks is because you're counting the weeks. Leviticus 23, 7 Sabbaths complete, then count 50 days. That's 102 days. That number is very important, because that just so happens to be the complete growth cycle of wheat. And furthermore, at 50 days into that count, you can't grind that wheat into flour. So my point is, and the problem I think that we have is, it's impossible to have a wheat festival at the time where Christians call Pentecost. Okay, and I think there's an explanation. It's either an inserted day because of a misunderstanding, right? Because you see the Jews only counting 50 and they're counting omers, therefore you base your Shavuot on the same thing that Jews are doing, and therefore we have a double mistake, right? That's not malicious, that's not intentional. That was just, oh, I see what they're doing in this, okay, right? And then we come up with something very similar, but not the same. And then we take what we see in Acts 2, where it says, when Pentecost was fully come, and we assume that was 10 days later because Yeshua ascended at 40 days. It doesn't say 10 days later. It says when it's fully come. And furthermore, if we're talking about Shavuot, we still got a long way to go, because we got no wheat. There's no way we can be celebrating Shavuot. If Shavuot and Pentecost are the same day, there's no way we can be celebrating Shavuot at 50 days. That is the premise of my presentation to you guys. We have lost connection to agriculture. We have no idea. And by the way, I just want to say this, I'm not the first to discover this. And I didn't get this from someone else. I just noticed this and knew what I knew about grain and just started thinking, how is that possible? And then I found others that were saying the same thing online, and I took it as witnesses. Okay. So to prove my point to you, I'm going to have to give you a crash course in wheat. And so I'm asking you to please endure that, you know, just endure it. Some people have, they start getting, when you start talking about science and agriculture and things like that, they start going to sleep and they can't handle it. But this is important because our calendar is based on grain, and the whole fulfillment of the seven feasts of Yeshua is based on that. Yeshua was the first fruits of the resurrection, correct? Is that not what Paul teaches us? That he rose on first fruits, which is the morrow after the Sabbath, right? Not 1 week later, 1 day later, because the Sabbath is the next day, the day he's in the tomb. It's 1, 2, 3, 14, 15, 16 on Yah's calendar, because the 15th is always a Shabbat on every month, you guys. And so it's, the text says in the New Testament that Mary came to the tomb after the Shabbat. What Shabbat? The 15th, the day he was, the day. All right, so she couldn't go the next day, right? Why? It's the Shabbat. So what day did she go? The first day of the week. The next day, the 16th. That's where we get the wave sheaf offering. We see that in Leviticus 23. Leviticus 23. Let's go there. And then I'm going to set this off for you. I got something really, because I was so tired and had been up most of the night smoking a brisket. I didn't do this presentation like I'm about to do it for you. You're getting the more fuller version of that, right? So I took them to Leviticus 23 and showed them Feast of First Fruits. And then you see there, it says the Feast of Pentecost. Well, both of them are a first fruits feast. One is the first fruits of barley. One is the first fruits of wheat. Okay. However, in the Hebrew, it is not called Pentecost. It is called Shavuot, which is translated in the English as Feast of Weeks, because we are counting weeks. Watch. And ye shall count unto you from the morrow after the Sabbath, and from the day that ye brought the sheaf of the wave offering. We're talking about the barley there, right? And by the way, barley and wheat are not harvested in the same time. They may have overlapping growth periods, but they are not harvested at the same time. When you come to the end of the barley harvest, you're starting the beginning of the wheat harvest, folks. Okay, so it kind of dovetails together. They might overlap just a little bit. All right, so keep that in mind. And that's why it's laid out like this. And it's not just the barley and the wheat. There's other things involved too, like corn and millet and grapes and olives and pomegranates and other things that are growing that they are harvesting. Everybody follow, right? But for this particular thing, the wheat, we want to get the right count for the wheat harvest, the beginning of it, because this is going to mark the Pentecost, right? Or Shavuot. And ye shall count from the morrow after the Sabbath, which is the 16th on Yah's calendar. And from the day you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, 7 Sabbaths shall be complete. That's your first part of the count. There's 2 parts of it, folks. And by the way, this is 50 days. If you count a new moon, it's 51 days. But that's just one part of the count. The next part of the count is just like you do Jubilees. You don't do Jubilees one time and that's it. That's it. It's only one Jubilee. No, Jubilees is consecutive. A 50 count, a 50 count, a 50 count. It's the same thing with this count. We're counting 50, but the first part is 7 Sabbaths complete. And then it says, after the 7th Sabbath is complete, or the morrow after the 7th Sabbath, in other words, the day after, that's when you start counting 50 days. So the day after the 7th Sabbath is complete. So the first 7 weeks, we're only counting Sabbaths. Sabbath 1, Sabbath 2, Sabbath 3, Sabbath 4, Sabbath 5, 6, and 7. And after the 7th Sabbath, the next day, we number 50 days. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All the way up into Shavuot, folks. That is what the count says. All right. Now, what happens on that time. Ye shall bring out of your habitation 2 wave loaves, 2 tenths, and it should be of fine flour. You see that? The only way we can get flour and we can get loaves is if we got grain that is golden and dried out in the sun and has been properly, you know, planted in its season. Because you can plant this stuff out of season, you can get a wiry, sickly looking crop, but you're not going to get a harvest, okay? Because the grain knows when it's supposed to do its thing. You cannot manipulate it in the sense that you can say to the grain, I want you to sprout right now. No, you can only do that from manipulation in the DNA. Everybody understand that? That is where we get GMO grains. Everybody follow. You can't tell a grain what you want it to happen and then put it in the ground. No, it knows what to do when you put it in the ground. If you put it in the ground out of season, it won't do what it's supposed to do. It will only do what it's supposed to do when you plant it in its season. Everybody understand that? Ecclesiastes tells us that everything is in its season. That is a basic concept in this, right? So the only way we can have 2 loaves and flour for this is if we have a harvest. So I want to point this out to you. Most groups are celebrating Pentecost, aka Shavuot, if you're only counting 50 days, somewhere between the middle of May and the first week of June. Let me show you why this can't work. All right, so this is on the Catholic observance. Let's just do the Catholics first. Catholic observance. You know what day that puts them on? Pentecost for the year 2025, and it changes every year, is observed on Sunday, June 8th. And it's celebrated the 7th Sunday from 50 days after Easter. You know when Easter was? Yesterday. Right? So they're counting 50 days, and that'll put them in June 8th, which is okay. You could possibly get some wheat there, but it's stretching it, okay? I'm going to show you that in just a moment. We're going to look at the growth cycle of in real-time time lapse, wheat, winter wheat and spring wheat, and you're going to see something really profound here. Neither one of them, all right, because when it's winter here in the United States, guess what? It's winter in Israel at the same time. Everybody understand that? When it's spring in the United States, it's spring in Israel. Everybody know that. We get the same sun, we get the same moon, we get very similar rain. It's called the grain belt. Everybody understand that. It's the very same. There's nothing different. There's nothing magical about Israel. It's a special place, but it's not magical. It's not grain is not going to grow differently in Israel. By the way, Israel is not a major exporter of barley nor wheat. If you go just a little bit north of that to Ukraine is, and then Russia is like the #1 in the world, right? But they're also working with a lot of GMO wheat, and that's mostly the winter wheat, which is very different than what it was in ancient times, all right? Because we only had a spring wheat. Winter wheat became something that was hybridized. It was something that they could plant before the snow started, and then it would lay dormant with the snow, and then when the snow melted, it used that moisture to grow a little bit more in the springtime. But it was just basically a head start. You still could not harvest that until early summer. May, either way you go with spring wheat or with winter wheat, there's nothing harvestable in May. It's an overlap zone that it's impossible to have Shavuot there. And I believe the Father made it that way, so it was so obvious that Pentecost is not Shavuot, folks, okay? So let's get into that. I want to start off with this one right here so we can understand, the difference between these kind of wheats. There is a difference between spring wheat and winter wheat. Spring wheat is planted in the spring. Winter wheat is planted in the spring. So let me show you what that looks like on a calendar. All right, and I'm sorry about the Jewish star there. So currently, right here is where they're harvesting wheat for Pentecost. As you can see, it's clearly listed there in the third month. That is May and June, which is pushing it, right? Now you can clearly see that over here is when we're sowing wheat. This would be November, December, January, February. So this would be the end of fall going into winter. You could start sowing early as November, but you're still not going to have wheat ready in the third month of Sivan, even if you did that. That's the earliest you could sow it. The next time we're sowing wheat, and this is called the spring wheat, is guess what month, folks? It's the end of February into March. And guess what? You're not going to have wheat ready in May. It's going to extend all the way into August. So either wheat that you plant is not going to be ready in the third month. Everybody with me? I'm going to show you that right now. All right. Let's learn about spring wheat and winter wheat.
HD full episodes and more.
Hang tight. I want to make sure you guys can hear this.
Now available on Acres TV, the newest ag platform connecting you to fields of information. Look for us on watchacrestv.com.
You guys, it's showing my screen is paused. Are you guys able to see this video? Let me know. Somebody.
We're still seeing the chart.
Still seeing the chart. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good to know, because I'm trying to show you a video. Here it is. You guys able to see this?
Yes.
There we go.
We're going to see the difference between spring wheat and winter wheat, okay?
During our Farm Basics time today, we're going to talk about the difference between spring wheat and winter wheat.
Well, it is still wheat, whether it's grown in the spring or it's planted in the fall, but there's a big difference here. With winter wheat, it's going to be put out before winter, and it's going to go dormant through the winter and then thrive in the very early spring.
The big difference here is spring wheat is going to get raised in the spring, planted in the spring. It's going to grow right away and you're done. With winter wheat, it's got to go through a vernalization process. Basically, the soil's going to get cold at some point. It's going to hit that, and then we're in pretty good shape. We carry through to the next year.
Now, this makes growing winter wheat just a little bit more difficult because you're worried about, hey, I'm going to do everything right in the fall, but I may have problems with winter survival. If, for example, we don't get any snow cover and we get a very cold winter and that wheat.
All right. So the key to winter wheat survival, you guys, is this wheat was developed from hybridization and modification to to be able to grow in more northern latitudes like Ontario, North Dakota, Kansas, places like that that get snow, right? Where it gets really wet. So this kind of look how it looks like grass. When it comes up like this, when you plant it in the winter, right, or in the fall, going into winter, it'll look like grass. It'll snow on top of this, and that snow will become moisture to grow this and to give it a boost for the spring. Okay, so coming into the spring fall, right, it'll have a boost, but it's still not going to be ready in May. It's going to be ready probably the last part of June going into the to July. Okay, July is probably going to be the optimal part when you would harvest this. Even in May, this is going to be green. All right. Now, if you don't get snow, and this is what he's saying, the thing about trying to grow winter wheat, if you don't get a snow cover, because it needs snow cover to go dormant, it insulates it. If it's like this and it's just a harsh winter with wind and cold air, guess what happens to this? It'll kill it because it doesn't have the snow to insulate it, and you can lose your crop. So growing winter wheat is actually a gamble to do this. And everybody that grows it, I guarantee you, is going to have crop insurance for each specific crop that they grow on this because it's a gamble. Okay. And this is because they're trying to manipulate the seasons and get longer growing periods. Everybody understand that? Winter wheat is a GMO type seed. It's a hybridized seed, and it does not exist or did not exist in ancient times in Israel. That's the point I want you to understand. Now I want you to listen to what he says here.
Wheat is just exposed to terribly low temperatures and harsh conditions. When you get snow on it, that's actually a good thing. Now, you may say, wait a second, snow on top of plants, that can't be a good thing. Snow acts as insulation and it keeps that temperature constant underneath. That's what we need to be really successful overwintering winter wheat.
Yeah, so the spring wheat isn't going to be able to survive the winter wheat will. But again, I want to come back to this vernalization process. Basically, things have to get cold to a certain degree in order for that wheat to go into the next year and flower and put on seed and everything else. But we don't worry about that, quite frankly, at all in the north. We're very, very cold.
Well, and you'll see.
By the way, it's rare that you get snow in wheat fields in Israel. Everybody understand that? It's not a zone where you get a lot of so growing winter wheat, it's going to go differently because you're going to have cold temperatures and cold wind blowing across a bare ground that has grass basically, and by the time spring comes around, guess what color your wheat is? It's brown because it's been wind burnt. You ever got your lips chapped with cold wind? Plants do not do well with windy, cold air, especially dry, cold air, you guys. It will not survive. It has to have snow on it to insulate it. So you don't really see any winter wheat grown in Israel, folks. Israel's going to be more toward what we are doing in the southern parts of the United States. Okay, keep that in mind. All right.
Winter wheat grown in some parts of North America, and in other areas, it's just spring wheat. So this does vary by geography a little bit, and there are some areas that'll be both. Like, for example, around our farm, you could get crop insurance for spring wheat. That was a common practice, but winter wheat wasn't. So that was something that farmers, if they were going to do that, they'd be on their own because they were fairly unique in.
You hear what he said? Back in the day, you couldn't get winter wheat insurance. Why? It's a gamble. Because you got to have the right conditions to get a winter wheat to grow. And even still, you're not going to get a harvest in May. You're not even going to have harvestable wheat in May. It's not going to help that you planted early. Because I hear that all the time. Oh, well, they just planted early in Israel. That's how they got it. No, wheat knows its season, folks. You can't just plant wheat whenever you want and expect it to do what it's supposed to do. It's not going to happen that way. And you can pray over it. You can do dances over it, all kinds of incantations. It is not going to matter. Okay. The only way you can get things to be manipulated is how? In the laboratory. Do we want that kind of wheat? No, that's not the wheat we're talking about. All right.
The area.
With winter wheat, it typically yields more, and that's the reason why we like it. But then again, there is more risk because now that crop has to be out there for a lot of months. So you could have some things go wrong. Let's just say we don't have snow cover and it gets ridiculously cold. It's possible we could kill off some of the winter wheat. If it doesn't go into the winter very healthy, it's possible you could kill off some of that winter wheat. So there's just a lot more risk with winter wheat. But since it does yield more, that's the one I like to raise.
Well, winter wheat and spring wheat can both be very profitable crops. They can be nice in a crop rotation, whether that be after a soybean.
By the way, by the way, what you just saw there with those heads, that's what it looks like in May. And you can't harvest that. You can't, you can harvest early, but guess what? You still got to dry that grain out for about 3 or 4 weeks on a like a big rock or something. All right. All right. So let's move to the next one I got for you. Right. Here's one that's really
on realagriculture.com. It's brought to you by
wheat school, you guys, of all things.
Syngenta Canada.
All right, Syngenta. You guys heard of a Monsanto? Syngenta is another one of those companies. Keep that in mind. So, in a lot of this stuff, we're talking about GMO. We've only got about, 8 or 9 heritage race seeds from ancient times. It goes back 10,000 years. The other 185 and 190 varieties are GMOs and going to be hybridized. Everybody understand that? Okay. This is one of the companies that does that.
And the Alberta Wheat Commission. Hi, I'm Bernard Tobel. Welcome to the Wheat School. Today, I'm down at Ridgetown College, University of Guelph, catching up with Emma Dealman. Emma, how's it going?
Going good. Glad you could come out.
Well, thank you for the invitation. Today, we're going to take a look at some of Emma's research work for her graduate studies. And Emma, it's an interesting, we've got a soybeans field here, and you're talking about wheat planting date, a lot of your work, but hey, it really starts with soybean desiccation. Tell us about your project. Take us through it.
Exactly. So what we're looking at here is how we can get our wheat planted on time and really quantifying the effects of planting date on winter wheat yield. And as you said,
you guys, why would she say getting their wheat planted on time if time was not a factor, right? You cannot plant grain or anything just whenever you want to. Now you can if you got a green. Now let me take that back. If you're doing things on a small scale where you're controlling all aspects, like a greenhouse, yes, you can. But when you're growing for a population, you're using nature and the timing of the sun, moon, and stars and the seasons, you cannot do that. All right. I just want to be clear on that.
it starts here with the soybeans. And part of this project is looking at some soybean desiccation and whether we can apply a desiccant to the soybeans and then be able to get them off a little bit earlier and get that wheat planted on time.
So tell me about the soybean desiccant.
And the reason they do this is because they're going to use the soybean, and this is not organic, by the way, you guys. What they're doing here is they're trying to use the dead stuff from the soybean to fertilize the wheat that they're going to plant. And help their crop and stuff. So this is a college, by the way. And so this is where you're going to see, and this is even in Israel, even though Israel's not a major supporter of grains, they are major in GMO research. Okay, let's be real clear about that. They're one of the best in modifying things to conditions. Okay. With that being said, they're not a major exporter of grains like barley and wheat. It just the conditions in you have to manipulate everything too much. Okay.
Portion of your work here. How many trials do you have here? How many setups? What did you learn?
So in this field here, we have 4 different soybean cultivars being grown.
Okay, I don't think I want to keep looking at that one, you guys. I want to move right along and show you. Now, let me show you this guy right here, because I have seen each year I see people that will send me videos of a wheat field being harvested in Israel. And I'll look at it really closely and I'll see the machinery that's doing it. And in many cases, it's they're baling up barley at the end of the barley harvest for animals. And it's not wheat at all. And so I come across this guy right here who it looks to me like he planted wherever he is some wheat to try to see if he could get wheat in middle of May, right? And it looks like he did it out of season. He still got a harvest, but his harvest and his crop just looks like crap. And even still, he harvested early to say he got a harvest in the middle of May. But even still, when he made the video, you could see when he made the video, it's in the middle of June. So he still had to wait a couple of weeks for the grain to dry because the grain was green. He harvested when the field looked like this right here, you guys. You can't harvest wheat when it's green. Well, you can, but you're going to have to dry at some point, and that takes weeks. And so it takes over 100 days to grow wheat, but then you got several weeks in the field where it dries, folks. And this is where people get caught off because we're not waving sheaves of Abib wheat. We are baking loaves and waving. So you got to have flour. So you got to have grain that's been dried in the field. It's everybody follow. So let's look at what this guy did here. Look at his field, first of all. You see how sparse it is? He even gets in kind of close in here in a moment where you can see some of the heads on his grain there, which don't look really good. Like that right there. You see that head? That's a sickly looking head. And his whole field looks like this. Okay.
Hey everyone. I'm on vacation at the beach this week, but I wanted to share a special video message with you today. Sometimes the Bible is hard to understand because people in the ancient world live so differently than we do. For instance, if we want some bread, we go to the grocery store and we buy it. But people in the Bible had to grow their own bread. They had to harvest it, thresh it, winnow it to separate the wheat from the chaff, and then they had to grind the wheat into flour to make a dough and then bake their bread. And that's a lot of work. Aren't you glad that we have grocery stores that sell bread? A lot of stories in the Bible reference farming techniques which we're just not that familiar with. And I wanted to learn more about those techniques. So I grew some wheat over the winter and I harvested it this month. So today I'll show you some of the ancient techniques they used in the Bible.
All right, you guys. All right.
Grow.
All right, so he's admitting to you that he has grown some winter wheat, all right, that has a specific planting period. Now, I think because, listen, when you do an experiment, it does not do the experiment any justice if you interfere. Does that make sense? You can't manipulate it and expect a honest output, right? What this guy did, and as you'll see in his footage there, is he harvested his field, which wasn't grown in really good conditions. I don't know where he's located, but he had a sparse harvest that he still couldn't make into bread until in the middle of June because he posted the video after he was able to make bread. Anyway, that's the flaw I see in his little experiment.
Then I'm going to make some wheat flour, and my wife, Kelly, is going to bake some bread. Bread has been an essential part of human life from the very beginning of human existence. Historians believe that grains like wheat baked into bread made it possible for modern civilizations to thrive. The reasons we have cities like Dalton, Atlanta, and New York is because people learned how to grow and use grain to feed everybody. Jesus knows bread is essential to life. He saw all the hungry people around him, and he said in John 6:33 through 35, "The true bread of God is the one who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world." "Sir," they said, "give us that bread every day." Jesus replied, "I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never be hungry again. Whoever believes in me will never be thirsty." This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. The first step in the process of making bread is planting the field. There are two main types of wheat: winter wheat and spring wheat. Winter wheat is planted in the fall and grows over winter and is harvested in the spring. Spring wheat is planted in the spring and grows over the summer and is harvested in the fall. I planted my wheat in September, grew it over winter, harvested it in May.
Okay. All right. Right here. Stop. Hold the press. Did you hear what he said? This guy did this experiment because he was determined, in spite of what the experiment was truly going to show you, he was going to show you that he could get wheat in the spring. Nowhere in the Bible does it say that we have wheat in the spring. Matter of fact, the Bible tells us that summer is the harvest time for wheat. It is not in the spring, folks. It's not. The devil is determined to keep this day hidden from you. I'm telling you. So he does this experiment. And this is some of the videos that I get where people say, oh, no, you can get wheat. You can get wheat in May. And just like, they're doing this in Israel in ancient times, right? So no, you can't get it in May. This is not what a wheat field's supposed to look like, by the way. All right. This is unhealthy. The heads are not uniform. This is unhealthy. He's planted this out of season to try to poop, but he's done it in such a way that he's lapped it into the actual season where he could still kind of stretch it, but it's not convincing to me. It's not. You can't do this everywhere. And by the way, this would be a universal thing. Okay. We're not just, I know everybody wants to focus on Israel, but it's not just Israel. When the grain belt goes all the way across the world, all the way around on the northern hemisphere. The same sun, the same moon, the same rain periods, weather patterns. Look at the NOAA data. It's the same weather patterns in the northern hemisphere. The same growing seasons. When they're planting in the United States, they're planting in Europe, depending on the zone. Right? If you got zone 1 in the United States and zone 1 in Europe, they're planting in the same time because it's on the same latitude, right? So he did this experiment. He shows the whole thing. But you guys, if you look at when he posted the video, June 5th. June 5th is when when he could post it. That means so the first week of June, they had enough grain that they had dried out because they cut it about mid-March. It had to dry for 2 weeks. They could post a video about the first week of June, but this is not how they did it. And they weren't trying to force it out of season, okay? So I'm not convinced with videos like that, with people trying to prove a point. Right? All right, so I want to show you, instead of going into, this is really good here. We might watch just a little bit of this before we see the two winter wheat and spring wheat time lapse. All right, so we're going to learn a little bit about wheat right here.
When humanity made the great transition from hunting and gathering to agriculture and farming, allowing civilization to rise and advance, the crop at the heart of that transition was wheat. Wheat presented the possibility of staying in one location and building up food reserves instead of having to track and hunt for food exclusively. And this paved the way for villages, towns, and cities to rise up. It could be argued that wheat is one of the most significant natural resources of all time, with a history stretching back tens of thousands of years. This essential commodity was responsible for both the rise and fall of the mighty ancient Egyptian empire, playing a major role in not only providing year-round sustenance to its citizens, but also in commerce and even religion and spirituality. Though the wheat we grow and harvest today is a far cry from the wheat our ancestors consumed, Largely due to genetic manipulation as agriculture was commercialized, it still remains a staple food source in many nations.
You hear what you just said? Very different than our ancestors have because of genetic manipulation.
In today's world, the global wheat supply is being put under duress by the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and concerns about its availability and price have started to bring to the forefront just how important wheat is to sustaining the world's growing population. On today's episode, we seek to find the grains of truth within this commodity that has been feeding us all for millennia. It's wheat on commodity culture. The cultivation of wheat stretches back approximately 10,000 years, and wheat's overall history as a food source goes back much further, with milling operations from Asia being discovered by archaeologists that date back 75,000 years. In terms of humanity's consumption of the grain, we can go back even further in time, as prehistoric hunter-gatherer humans discovered wheat grain was edible, and so foraged for it along with fruits and vegetables. In today's world, wheat takes up more farmland than any other crop on the planet, with over 500 million acres being devoted to the plant, yielding approximately 750 million metric tons per annum. Wheat plants have long, slender leaves and stems that are hollow in most varieties. The inflorescences, meaning a group or cluster of flowers arranged on a stem, contain varying numbers of tiny flowers, ranging from 20 to 100 in number. These flowers are born in groups of 2 to 6 in structures called spikelets, which later hold the subsequent 2 or 3 grains produced by the flowers. The plant needs to grow to its full height to develop flowers, where reproduction takes place, ensuring wheat's genetic destiny in the form of seeds. This process takes place in 4 phases. The first phase is called tillering. In this phase, the subsurface crown produces leaves and lateral branches known as tillers. Next is the stem extension phase, where the plant grows up to its full height through a series of stem segments connected to each other by nodes. Following this is the heading phase, where the stem terminates in a head or spike at the top of the plant. At this point, each head fertilizes its own flowers due to the movement of pollen from the male stamen, the pollen producing part of the flower.
All right, you guys, if you see these little white things, and when you see Yeshua talking about the fields are white for the harvest, he's talking about this time right here when it's pollination time, because all of these little things right here, which will eventually break off when they're done, is releasing pollen. It's pollinating this whole thing. So this is when, and that's what made what he said absurd at the time, because he said it's still 4 months until the harvest, but I tell you now that the fields are white for the harvest, right? This is the time he's talking about right here.
Flower to the female stigma, the part of the plant where pollen germinates. Next up, grain develops in the final step, the ripening phase, and then the plant begins to wither and die. Each grain or kernel of wheat consists of a wheat plant embryo called a germ, encased in a thick outer coating called the bran, and fueled by the protein-rich endosperm. These resources nurture and protect the wheat germ, causing it to sprout from the soil into a new wheat plant. The reason that wheat has become such an important dietary staple across the world is due to its resilience, as it is able to be grown in many different types of soils and climates. Although it can thrive in a variety of environments, wheat is best adapted to temperate regions with rainfall between 30 and 90 centimeters. The 2 major types of the crop are winter and spring wheat, with the severity of the winter determining whether a winter or spring type is cultivated. Winter wheat is always sown in the fall, whereas spring wheat is usually sown in the spring, but can be sown in the fall in areas where winters are mild.
All right, so that's to be understood. You guys, do we have the same spring and fall as Israel? What's the answer to that? When it's springtime in the United States, is it springtime in Israel? Yes, it is. When it's wintertime in the United States, is it wintertime in Israel? Yes, it is. The seasons are the same. So the planting times are going to be exactly the same, folks. It may vary from farmers are finicky and sometimes they're late, sometimes they're early, and they're gambling when they do that because there is a window that they have to plant, folks. Yah has ordained it that way. Okay?
The earth is home to thousands of varieties of wheat, but the most common varieties are as follows. Triticum aestivum, also called common wheat. This variety is used for flour and bread making and is believed to have originated in the Middle East's Fertile Crescent. Today, farmers cultivate nearly 100 of the 200 known varieties of common wheat, which are classified as hard or soft, red or white, and winter or spring. Triticum durum. Durum wheat primarily ends up as semolina, the grains used to make macaroni, spaghetti, and other pastas. There are 8 known varieties. Triticum compactum, also called club wheat, is a subspecies of Triticum aestivum. Club wheat produces a softer flour and is mostly used in crackers, cookies, cakes, and pastries. In addition to the wide variety of edible products made from wheat, it also sees some industrial use. The starch from wheat is used to improve the strength of paper. In the US alone, the paper manufacturing industry uses over 5 billion pounds of starch every year. Wheat gluten is
All right. So what I wanted you to get out of that is there's basically two kinds of wheat, spring and winter, and in those two are subgroups. All right, that you have in that, and from that you got basically 200 varieties, which spawn about, he said, about 1,000 worldwide, which are not all original, you guys. Is that very understood? We're not, so some wheats that might do things differently now in different places is not what we had and not what we're talking about when it comes to the biblical. Okay, so I want to be very clear. Now I want to show you timelines. So whether we're talking about winter wheat, let's start with winter wheat and look at a time lapse. So winter's going to be the same, United States or Israel. So planting is going to be the same. So guess what? This is what it's going to look like. Kansas is the area that this guy is planting. All right. This is clearly winter wheat. All right. Watch this. We're going to have wheat in May. Let's see. And by the way, this is another one of those, farmers and colleges work together, so they're always trying new things, and that's what's going on in this comparison. It's two different fields that's being grown side by side. Look at the time, which is the planting time, September. All right. Let me stop right here and go to this that I was showing you earlier. September time. Right. So we're coming out of the harvest. What are they doing? They're plowing and getting the field ready. So this particular video, they're doing it even earlier. They're planting in September, you guys, instead of Kislev. All right, keep that in mind. Winter wheat. Watch what's happened. So if we're planting winter wheat in Israel, when are we getting the harvest? Sorry. It won't let me just roll through. I am so sorry. We got to do this again. Here we go. They're planting this. Look at the time they're planting this in September. So even earlier, winter wheat earlier. September. Are we going to have wheat in May? From May to June, let's just say that. Are we going to have grindable wheat we can make into flour? I want you to notice what happens during the winter, because this is winter wheat. And winter wheat can only survive if there's snow. So if you're planting winter wheat in Israel and there's no snow, it's going to die. By the way, when they left Israel, when they left Egypt, and the barley and the flax was smitten, this is what the wheat looked like. The wheat looked like grass. This is why it was not smitten. Okay. Showing a comparison between the controlled field and the treated field. So this is a controlled field over here. This is a treated field. We're in winter. See the snows on there? All that water is going to be used to nourish these plants when it comes out, but also it's insulating these plants during winter. If there's no snow and it's freezing temperatures, guess what happens to all of this? It dies. That's why it's a gamble, folks. Are they doing this in Israel? Were they doing this in ancient times? Absolutely not. They were only planting spring wheat. We're in spring now. We're in spring now. Everybody see that? We're in spring. April. April, and we haven't even come into head yet. I'm showing you the comparison between the two different ones with the root ball. April 22nd, that's where we are. Watch the field. May. Wait, right there. Middle of May up until this point is when you first start seeing people talking about Pentecost. And it's depending on the calendar they are. Look at what the wheat looks like. You see what it looks like? And this is universal, you guys. Let me show you a wheat field in May that somebody sent me. Can you guys see that right there? It's the same thing. It's universal. This is in May, in the middle of May right there. All right.
We can't see it.
All right, here we go. This is what it looks like in May. And this is in the deep south of the United States. So like I can't remember. Maybe Mississippi. I don't remember where she was when she showed me this. So that's May, right? That's what it looks like in the video that we're looking at right there. Hang on, hang on. May 23rd. Go back to it. May 23rd. We got a wheat field that's green. You cannot make this into flour, folks. If you harvest it right here, and you could harvest it premature, it would still take you 2-3 weeks to dry this out before you can make flour. You can't do it. All right, let's continue to watch. Watch to the end of the harvest. When are they harvesting this? Winter wheat. It's got to be golden. Now we're into golden wheat. You see the date? And it's universal. Now let's look at the spring wheat. Some will say, well, John, it's a spring wheat, and okay, that means we're planting wheat. All right, because I want you to look at this date where this is coming up. This wheat is coming up in early June. All right, that means this wheat was planted in May. Right, this is spring wheat, folks. Can you see that? Spring wheat. It's the same thing in Israel. When you plant spring wheat in the spring, this is what it's going to look like in June. So you don't even have wheat. It can't be spring wheat at all. That when they're celebrating Pentecost, it can't be. It's got to be a winter wheat, and that's impossible because winter wheat didn't even exist. Right? Now we could plant this earlier. We could have planted this earlier than May. Let's say we go back a little bit and do that. It's still going to look like grass in May. We can go back to February and plant this early as February in the Middle East, in Israel, and in Egypt. It's going to look like grass in May. So this is spring wheat planted in May. Let's watch what. So you got two harvests in the summer. The winter wheat is what we're harvesting early summer. Spring wheat is what we're harvesting at the end of summer, August to October. And that encompasses what? Sukkot, the Feast of the Ingathering, the end of the wheat harvest. So we can account for both wheat harvest and the way that wheat grows, and none of it is ready to be harvested in May, you guys. It's impossible. Spring wheat, June, this is what it looks like. So don't tell me they're harvesting spring wheat in May. That's not what spring wheat is. Spring wheat is harvested late summer. You see what it is? August. Now we're into what? We're into Sukkot time now. Virgo is arising in the eastern sky in the morning. The Virgin, what's she clutching in her hand? Wheat. Why is she doing that? Because it's the end of the wheat harvest, folks. It's harvest time in September. The stars tell you, can everybody see that? And we're still in September, October is still Virgo time. Can everybody see that? The stars are telling you, the sun, moon, and stars, by the way, are telling you, hey, by the way, the wheat's ready. Can anybody see that? We cannot get around the calendar and manipulate the calendar and think, no, you can't. This is why I said there's a secret to these grain. There's a secret to the wheat. The wheat holds these days, the planting cycle, the growing cycle, the harvest cycle. They are all locked in time, folks, and it's been like that for 10,000 years that they know of. Other than manipulating the grain, which they do, that's admitted, you can alter it. And even when you manipulate the grain, unless you grow into a greenhouse and you control all of the aspects of everything, you cannot get wheat in May. And the Catholic Church, you know, by the way, if you're on the Zadok calendar, you're celebrating Shavuot May 31st. There's no wheat in May 31st. If you're on the Roman Catholic calendar, that's June 8th. that you're celebrating Pentecost. And they're pushing to, by the way, yesterday was Easter for them. So if you count 50 days, that's June 8th, right? That's supposedly when Shavuot is. That is the beginning of, you might be able to get some wheat in June. You might, but they've already pushed the date. You see that with Easter? It's not, you're not even starting at the right day. So you're not in the right time. It has to be from the beginning of the year, counting to the 14th of Abib, which is Passover, right? That's, we're reconciling not only the year, but the month and the days from that point. If any one point is off in your count, you're going to be off. If you're keeping wave sheaf offering 1 week later, guess what your Shavuot's going to be? Especially if you don't count 102 days, it's going to be off by 1 week from everybody else. That's why we see such a crazy spectrum of people trying to keep the calendar. It's pulled apart and it's so unorganized. And guess what? The Father is not the author of confusion. Who's responsible for this? So my point in bringing this to you, and by the way, if I wanted to get views and be clout chasing and all that kind of stuff, I'd be putting out videos about the death of the Pope. What am I doing? I'm trying to reconcile this calendar for you guys and get you on the right date. And it's not going to get a lot of views. I can tell you that now. And I don't care about that. I only care about the truth. I came from the Pentecostal church, folks. That was like a big day in my church where the Holy Spirit was given to us. It was supposed to be when the law was given to us. I can show you in another presentation. That's not the case. When the law was given to us, they were worshiping the cow down below. All right. When he gave it to us orally and earlier in Exodus, that's where they count 50. And by the way, they weren't even at Sinai yet, so they couldn't have gotten the law. They weren't even at Sinai yet. And supposedly Shavuot or Pentecost is when they got the law. They weren't even at Sinai yet at 50 days. It has to be further in. It's when Moses came down with the actual law on tablets and he had to smash them. That's when Shavuot is. And by the way, if you do the count correctly to the lunar solar count, you know how you have a full moon on either side at Passover time and at Sukkot time? There's full moons on either side. So at the real Shavuot time, it is going to fall on every time, no moon. There's no moon. It is a new moon period conjunction when that day is, which I find really interesting because Yah hid the day. And I don't think it's just it's not a coincidence. He did that intentionally because he was going to hide the day because they had defiled it. And after the crucifixion, the Jews didn't even care about it. They didn't even care about first fruits or Shavuot. They don't. I got that from firsthand from a rabbi. He told me straight up why they don't do it. It was Constantine, folks. It all traces back to Rome. July 24th on the Feast of Weeks. Well, Marty, that should fall, and we need to look. It should always fall, if you do the count correctly, from the wave sheaf offering, which is the day after the Sabbath. It's going to fall on a new moon conjunction right at the time. So it'll be a no moon, or we'll be able to see a crescent, because it does kind of oscillate there. That's what it'll look like. This is why it's around a new moon time. I wouldn't tell you any other way. That's why it's 102 days. There's 2 new moons in there, and it falls on the second new moon. So a lot of confusion here. I think it has a lot to do with Constantine's edict, forcing the Jews not to observe the Feast of Weeks anymore. They started counting omers, and then the Christians saw what they were doing with only observing 50 and come up with Pentecost. And the day was lost to them. It does not say 10 days later in Acts 2, you guys. It says when it was fully come, which makes it, it could have said, you know, and 10 days later, or it could have said 62 days later. It does not specify because Yah made it hidden. He hid the day from us and was going to reveal it to us in the end times. I think it's part of his plan. All right. So you guys, I hate keeping you this late. It's already 4 till. That's all I got for you in this presentation. Thank you for listening to me. You got any questions before I wrap it up? I know it's late and I hate keeping you guys late like that when you got to work.
I have a question, Jonathan.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so we started our count. We count 7 Sabbaths complete after Shabbat, right after Passover, at the end of the unleavened week, right?
Yep, that's correct.
Start that, and we count 7 Sabbaths complete.
Yep.
Then the next day, after the 7th Sabbath is complete, then we start counting 50 days. So it's 49 plus 50, or however many new moons we have, how many days we have, right?
Yeah, it will. See there, Marty's confirming it. So Marty's telling us that July 24th is the day of the moon will be in a new moon phase. It will be hidden. And I find it absolutely incredible that this is a hidden day, obviously, because we got this thing called Pentecost, and it's on a new moon day. That's a hidden day, right? So he hid this on purpose. I think it has to do with a lot with Constantine, but also what they did at Sinai when they defiled the day. That Yah just kind of,
Is that also,
yeah.
let's see, what was I going to ask you? Shoot.
This is the day that they were in the upper room that the Holy Spirit fell. It is on that day that Marty is showing in the chat right now. July 24, 2025 is when it is this year. And it is the new moon right
Is
here.
the day that no man knows, is the day that no man knows, is that the night where it's hidden?
That's that all right. So that's another day. That's with trumpets, and it has again a hidden day having to do with a new moon. But this is the 7th month when that happens. This is another one that
Okay.
I've identified. So you got to see that Yah he's pretty
Hey,
good at
Jonathan.
hiding. He's pretty good at hiding things. Yeah, Marty.
Hey, also World Last Chance has their Feast of Weeks on July 23rd. So they're a day off like they were for Passover.
Yes,
But
yeah. And
right
they always
again,
are.
you know?
That's what I mean about everybody's all scattered, and I get that. And even those that are keeping the new moon as the full moon, they're like 2 weeks off from everything else. Bless their heart. But this is the dyslexic of the lunar solar calendar people, and I'm not being mean about it. I'm saying that with love. They do everything backwards.
May
Yeah.
I share something? A couple of years ago, I was getting so upset with the arguing that was going on among the people on this particular upcoming festival that I got on my ISA 2 basic, and I went to the Hebrew and I read it, and it made complete and total sense that you count 7 Sabbaths complete, and then on the morrow after the Sabbath, you count 50 days. It is in the Hebrew. I don't see how anyone can argue with that.
Well, they do. They
yeah,
do.
I know.
They absolutely do. And it defies all logic. And when you line up the growth cycle of the grain, which is what this is all about, it fits when wheat is harvested. By the way, the Bible tells us that wheat is a summer harvest. It doesn't say that it's in spring. That's the devil that did that. And by the way, I noticed a pattern here recently where, there's 2 Sinais that are known. One's in Egypt, one is the real one. There is 2 places where they believe Yeshua was buried, right? There's the Catholic version and then there's the Garden version, right? There's 2 different places where they claim Yeshua was crucified. There's the Holy Sepulchre, and then there's the other place, right? So I see with every one of these, there's always a fake. There's always a fake. The devil has always given us something as a fake. And so I'm suggesting that whether it be a misunderstanding or it be an intentional, malicious attempt, some way or another, this day, Pentecost, is out of place. It does not line up. It cannot be Shavuot. Whether it's another day, that's another story. But it cannot be Shavuot. It cannot be 7 Sabbaths complete in 50 days. Or your misunderstanding of Leviticus. It can't be concerning wheat because you don't have wheat ready for
Jonathan,
making flour. Yeah. Yes.
when it's 50 days, you count another 50 days, but you said we don't count the 2 moon days, correct? The 2 new moon days?
There's going to be 2 new moon days in there automatically. You can't get around that because when you go from month to month, there's going to be a new moon day, right?
Do we count those days or do we not count those days? Is what I'm asking.
It's included in the count. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. It's included in the count because of the day that it started. When we start on a Shabbat and the day after Shabbat, what it's going to do is line you up to the new moon days, because that's when each month the new moon days are going to, especially if you're looking on the Gregorian, it's going to tell you what day that is, right? Whether it's a Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday on the Gregorian, but it's going to line up. And so you can't go 2 months without having at least 2 new moon days. So that's a part of the count, right? And that's how we have 102 days in that, because of those 2 moons that are in there. You could see that based off of when you start and when you stop. It's going to fit, I promise. It may be off 1 day or so, depending on who you're listening to. World's Last Chance, like Marty says, it's going to be off 1 day, but you're still going to be in that time frame, the new moon time, right? It's not going to be full moon time, 2 weeks difference, right? And it's by the moon. By the way, farmers do that to this day. They plant by the moon. Do they not?
Just like in the Farmer's Almanac.
Exactly. That's why they do it in the farm. They plant by the moon. Okay. So Native Americans did that. Natives everywhere did that. Ancient people did that. The moon has a purpose. The Father created it for a purpose. And by the way, Babylon did not create the moon. The witches of Eastwick did not create the moon. I don't care what they do with the moon, but it has nothing to do with what we're doing with keeping the calendar, period. So don't let nobody tell you that you're worshiping the devil or you're keeping a Babylonian tradition because you observe the moon. They obviously do not know the Bible, period. And so that is what I got for you guys. It's coming up on 10 o'clock already. And I want to thank you for staying with me this late and letting me get this out of my system because it's been on me for a while, and we're coming up on the Shavuot, and every time we do, I know how special that day is. That is the day that the Spirit was poured out in the upper room, you guys, not at day 50. And so if you're expecting that that's the day and we're keeping appointments, I'm sorry, that's the wrong day. Going by the count with the grain, it brings you into a later part of the year. It's not in May. And so that's the bottom line. All right. All right. Let me pray for you guys, and